Committee. We'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you for your patience. Do we have any bill introductions today? All right, not seeing any bill introductions. We'll move right into our agenda for the day. Pull this up here. We would like to thank Chanel Dupree for joining us. She is the Kansas City Regional Director for the Kansas Department of Children and Families and will be joining us to have a conversation over the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee. So we will welcome her to the podium and look forward to hearing. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Is everyone okay if I remove my mask to speak? Thank you. All right. Okay, such a pleasure to be here. Good to see everyone. I'm Chanel Dupree. I am the chair for the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee.
Could you pull your microphone? There you go, a little bit closer.
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely. So I am going to go ahead and begin. I did submit testimony. I'm not going to read the testimony to you, but I will just kind of ad-lib and go from there. Good to see you, Representative Payton. All right, so Chairman Owens, Vice Chair Smith, and the members of the House Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to share challenges and progress. So 2021 marks the 5th year and the anniversary of the passage of the 2016 Senate Bill 367, and it's very well known in Kansas. So much progress has been made in those 5 years, yet much work also needs to be done. So I like to think about Senate Bill 367 as the time when the state of Kansas came together across disciplines, across party lines, and decided that we were going to actually look at the data and figure out what's working well and what isn't working well for children who are involved in the juvenile justice system. And what we saw is that when children are deeply immersed in the juvenile justice system, things don't work out well, and they don't work out better. But instead, what works is when children have contact with the juvenile justice system, if we're able to keep them in their homes with their families and provide support, right, through different programming and things of that sort within their community, then they have a better likelihood of not going deeper into the criminal justice system. And we know that that's what we want, right? We don't want for children to have contact with the juvenile justice system, and then as a result of them having contact with the juvenile justice system, they stay connected to the juvenile justice system. If they're gonna touch it, we want for them to touch it, learn from it, and then move forward from there. And so that's what Senate Bill 367 does. And then the genius thing that happened was that you fine folks said, you know what, we're not just gonna lay out this beautiful policy and this beautiful idea, we're actually going to fund it, right? So that's of course where we have the evidence-based fund that became available. And so the evidence-based fund, of course, is the fund that is not for prevention services. It is designated for children who are justice-involved youth. That's what Senate Bill 367 says. And so the JJOC, the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee, has been tasked with basically making sure that all of the different recommendations and what's outlined in the statute is actually being implemented. Because it's not as easy as saying, okay, well, we know what works, so now let's just flip a switch and do it. So what we had to do was capacity building. So within the first, I would say 2 to 3 years, what the JJOC has been really focused on is, okay, what programs do we have, right? Instead of trying to create whole new ones, what do we have and how can we use these funds to actually bolster up the capacity so that youth can be involved in this process, youth and families. And then the other piece is, how do we let the community know what's happening? And then what's gonna be the process for actually administering the funds? So the JJOC has been involved in that and has been diligently working towards that for for the last 5 years. So it's marked 5 years. What we have found and what I found as chair is, man, it's so easy to get off focus and it's so easy to get off task and think through, all the wonderful things that we want to do. So what we did as a committee is we established a vision statement and a mission statement, which I am going to read for you, and then I'll go into a couple more points, and then I'll stand for questions. So the vision statement is to improve the lives and well-being of all youth in Kansas. Very broad, but that's what we want to do, okay? Mission statement. The Kansas Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee is a statutorily defined, multidisciplinary team of stakeholders of youth serving systems. The JJOC is responsible for regularly reviewing information and data on progress and outcomes across all parts of those systems. The JJOC provides policy and funding recommendations and influences stakeholders across agencies and branches of government on sound, data-driven, evidence-based implementation and sustainability of juvenile justice reforms. So, we're responsible, of course, for monitoring what's happening and collaborating with juvenile justice agencies and stakeholders to ensure that these best practices are followed for juvenile justice-involved youth and that they're receiving the appropriate supervision, assistance, and accountability. So I was asked to talk about what we've done and also what some of the challenges are. And like everyone else, right, we've, of course, experienced the impact of COVID and what that means for our youth. I think what we've seen, I know that what we've seen is a couple of things, but number one, I was going to say, right, the 21 million that was taken from the evidence-based funds. So, of course, we weren't very excited about that because the way that we have set up our funding process regarding recommendations is we have it to where programs are receiving a certain amount every year. And so when you take that money, that means that it can't last as long as we had planned for it to last because sometimes a critique is, oh, well, you have all this money, you have millions of dollars, why aren't you spending it? Well, we are, but what we can't do is have millions of dollars and then spend it the first year. What about the next year, right? So it has to be sustainable, and we have to do it in a way where we're hitting all the areas that Senate Bill 367 stated that we needed to do it. And so we were not happy, of course, with the taking of that, but in the governor's budget, she has recommended that 21 million of that be restored for evidence-based programs, for the evidence-based programs fund. So we are, of course, in support of that. And I'll just add a caveat that, again, it's important to remember that Senate Bill 367 does not allow for us to spend funds for prevention services. It has to be for justice-involved youth, and that's just what the statute says. That's what it outlines. And so, as the committee, it's important for us to just keep talking about the original intent behind implementing 367. So that, of course, has been a challenge. The other challenge, I would say, is just the capacity building, right? The understanding what it actually takes for programs to launch and then for them to be sustained. There was we set up kind of two different streams for people to access the funds. Of course, folks could just kind of write in and say that they wanted access to the funds, and then we also set up a way where we're connecting with the JCAP, so the local folks, and saying, from your seat, from what you see on the ground level, what are the needs, and we're going to, you can apply for these funds and then fund it within your local communities. And so there were a couple different processes that were set up. And of course, we want for all counties to take advantage of this, but I do think that there was a sense of, is this going to be money that's going to disappear next year? Are we going to be able to sustain it? So people needed to see that they could trust it. And so with the funds, hopefully being restored, that will allow that longevity to occur. I'll just highlight, just in concern of what's happened, that programs and services at the state and local level for fiscal year 21 totaled 14 over 14 million that we've expended. The Kansas Detention Assessment Instrument is used to keep youth out of detention when appropriate, and there has been a continued decline in youth intake, just 14% being placed in detention, driven by the results of the Kansas Detention Assessment Instrument. And the last point that I'll mention is the number of youth placed in the juvenile correction facility has continued to decline in 2021. In fiscal state year 2013, there were 360 youth placed at the JCF. In state fiscal year 2021, that number went down to 142, and this is a 61% reduction. So I will stop there and just thank the committee for your attention and smiling at me. Thank you. I appreciate that as I was rushing in, and see if there are any questions.
All right, thank you very much. I have a couple of questions that I wanted to ask. So you mentioned that the funding was only for justice-involved youth. Would you support expanding that to more prevention services? Or do you feel like that would dilute the specific directive of the fund?
So my background is child welfare, and I personally always believe that there's a benefit in going upstream and helping families never to become involved in our very complicated systems. But just in my position as the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee Chair, it's what we are focused on is making sure that we're following what's been outlined. And currently, as it stands, what's been outlined is that it is for justice-involved youth.
I appreciate that. You mentioned the $21 million that the governor did put back in her budget to be returned. Hopefully we can get that through the process. When we had the Joint Committee on Corrections, Juvenile Justice Oversight, we heard that it seemed like the administration of those funds, there was some confusion in those funds getting where they needed to go, that KDOC was under the impression they had to go through some kind of a budget process for that. Do you feel like that has been clarified and that the access to those funds has improved so that we can continue to take care of the youth?
Yeah, I think that before I was a part of the JJOC, I was a strong critic on how do people access the funds. I didn't think that it was clear on how you get access. And so I can say that as the JJOC, we have worked to clarify that process. Some of it is through RFPs, some of it is through just talking to the folks who are actually on the ground, who would have access, who would need and be in that world. Do I think we can do a better job with communication? Absolutely. But I do believe that has been a barrier in the past regarding how to access those funds.
Great, thank you very much. Committee members, questions? Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony, ma'am.
Thank you.
My questions are well-intentioned because they seem silly to me, but I don't know. I hear the term evidence-based thrown around everywhere. What do you consider evidence for evidence-based study?
Yeah, that's a great question. For instance, in the child welfare world, there's a clearinghouse. It's called the California Clearinghouse. And it means that this program has been vetted, there's been studies done, there's data, and it's proven to actually work. So in this space, it's the same thing, that there are different clearinghouses, essentially, that say, you know, this type of therapy, cognitive-based therapy, for example, has proven over time to work and to impact the folks that it's intended to. The criticism that I have with evidence-based programs, you didn't ask for this, but I'm going to give it to you, is that it takes a long time for something to become evidence-based. And so in that, sometimes it can be 10 years. So in that time, at times I think we can be missing out on some innovations that could really help families. So there's different levels, though. You have evidence-based, you have emerging, you have best practices. So there's many different terms. But what is clear is, according to 367, it's for evidence-based programs. The other thing that I do want to mention is that there are certain data points that we have to meet and that need to be measured. But the concerning factor is that although this has been laid out, the systems in the different departments didn't have the technology to even meet those requirements. So a part of the funds have been used to upgrade essentially our system so that the different departments can talk with one another. Did I
May I state back what I heard?
Yes, sir.
It may not be accurate, and I admit, but I'm hearing that evidence-based for you is based upon the studies of other people.
Yes, it's done by experts who are in the field, and yes, absolutely, evidence-based funds.
And then, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
One more. You mentioned that there is a decline in JCF population, and we all like that. Have you, in association with that, studied the rate of recidivism for those who otherwise may have gone in the past?
So I don't know if I understood the very last sentence that you said. I heard recidivism, but studied.
Well, okay. My background is I'm a prosecutor, former, retired,
I'm married to one.
and sent a lot of kids to JCF, and a lot of kids didn't send because some kids just screw up. And some kids are criminals. In fact, is the deadliest eyes I've ever seen was on a 14-year-old boy. You know when they have to go based upon their criminal history. And if there is a decline, then it's a decline of those that had to go. What studies do we have of those who otherwise would have gone in the past, but are not now? What's the rate of repeat criminal activity?
So I believe that's why I said the statement that I just said regarding that data and regarding the different departments and organizations talking to one another. So basically, KDOC has a set of information and a set of data, and then OJA has a set of data and set of information. And those departments and organizations, their data systems don't talk with one another. They're identified as different. Their identifiers are different essentially within their systems. So recidivism is absolutely a measure that we are working towards clearly defining. And so there are things in the works. So Athena is occurring with the department, and Odyssey is happening with OJA regarding the updates so that we can get that information. So I can't provide you with a clear answer, but what I can say is that I unfortunately agree that there are times where children do have to stay in the system because of different actions and safety for the community. And so we are interested in, and it's at the top of our list regarding getting that data and making sure that it's clearly outlined.
Thank you. I can appreciate the problems.
Thank you. And Representative Wheeler, I might add, and I might add this to everybody in the committee, next Thursday, we're going to be continuing the conversation on juvenile justice reform 367 in amongst a bill hearing. And we'll make sure that the OJA and KDOC are invited to that to see if they can't help answer some of those questions as well. I would also invite you, if you happen to have time, to join us, whether online or in person, because there might be additional questions at that time as well. Additional questions from the committee? Thank you. Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for your testimony. I wanted to find out, you had mentioned that you'd spent, the first 5 years understanding what tools and resources are available, what programs are available to you. Do you have a clear understanding of that at this point? And, more generally, what is your plan over the next, say, 5 years?
Yes, So the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee submits a report every year to the legislature, to the leadership, and to other entities. And in that, we have outlined basically what our plan is and how we're moving forward, and how we're identifying things. Let me give you just a quick example. So for instance, in Senate Bill 367, it talks about like mental health. And what we discovered is looking at the multidisciplinary folks who are on the committee, there's really not a mental health expert that is serving on the JJOC. And so we can put forth our best recommendations, but what we wanted to do is make sure that it's informed with what the actual needs are. And are we even capturing mental health? Because, this is juvenile justice. They're not mental health experts. And so what we did is we contacted SAMHSA, so a federal organization, and asked for them to come in and provide technical assistance so that they could provide recommendations on how to move forward. And then we're engaging with our folks in the state who are mental health experts. And so I would say that it's evolving as we're understanding where the gaps are and how we need to move forward. We have expended $14 million last fiscal year, and we have a plan that's outlined on how to funding the current programs, and then how to continue to expand and address the different issues that we need to address for juveniles in Kansas. I am more than happy to send that report directly to you, Chair, and hopefully you all will read the great words that took a lot of time to craft, and but a chart is at the end of it, and it clearly outlines all the different programs that we're funding and then plans for future years. Thank you.
That would be great. We'll make sure that gets distributed to the committee. Representative Howell.
Yes, I am interested in what you're saying about capturing the mental health. My question would be, thank you, Chairman, I forgot that part. I'm still learning. This is all brand new to me. I apologize. And Dean, thank you for coming today. I know you're, I'm sure, overly busy. But when it comes to capturing mental health, how is that done with juveniles? And do we have a mechanism in place to actually capture that kind of information? Because it is my understanding, just from personal family experience, that psychiatrists and counselors are actually quite reluctant to actually diagnose children with actual mental health conditions. Like, for example, if they're perfectly willing to say they have PTSD or anxiety or learning disabilities or behavioral issues, those types of things, but things such as, serious issues such as bipolar or schizophrenia or things of that nature. And I understand that it's very complicated, but how on earth can we possibly quantify that if the whole system is not comfortable with diagnosing children as a whole? So
logistically, the way that it works, and I had to do my own learning just in regards to this, is that at intake, that's usually where the information would be flagged. But the concern is that we're really not capturing the information because the people who are doing intake are not mental health experts. So the best that they could really do is to look at the signs and the symptoms that they're seeing. And then basically the next step would be then they refer to either the local community health mental health organization or whatnot. So that's a part of the learning that we're doing in concern of, okay, so within the pipeline of the system, how can we use the funds to best advocate for this? Is it that we need a new tool? Is it, what is it that we need to do? And so we have had meetings with KDH&E and KDADS, and they have some really great ideas, but that's kind of where we are. We're in the idea phase and working towards, okay, how can we formulate this and implement this for our youth in Kansas? Thank you.
All right, seeing none, thank you so much for being here. We really do appreciate the work of your committee and look forward to reviewing your report.
Thank you so much.
Certainly, thank you. All right, committee, looks like we are done for the day. We do have a full agenda of bill hearings next week and discussion, so certainly looking forward to that. And you're off tomorrow, so enjoy your weekend, and we'll be adjourned. Thank you.